What's going on, everyone? In this video, I'm going to be talking about what we're actually doing over the course of the next 12 months to scale past 10 million a year for some of the partners that we're working with. And so as every year approaches and this time comes around Q4, one of the things we're focused on is how we're preparing for the market, understanding the current conditions we're in. And for most people right now, it's probably one of the hardest times to scale without really causing much damage to your brand, spending a lot of money on paid, or just hiring an absurd amount of people and killing your margin overall, right? So we're in a pretty tough time, and we just came off probably one of our bigger months, I'd say. We did 3 million plus across the board with some of our partners, different models, different strategies for everyone. And that just goes to kind of complement this video because if there's one thing I can say, there's no one size fits all solution across this industry, especially for where we stand right now. And so diving right into it, before we get into the main stuff, what I want to talk about is really understanding what game you're playing and like what you're optimizing for. And so as much as skill and, those numbers look impressive, there's a starting point for everyone, and understanding what game you're playing and what strengths are you doubling down on and what are your weaknesses are going to help you really make it a lot longer in this game, right? And if there's one common theme for 2026 for us, it's longevity, right? And relevancy. Like, how do we maintain, in a saturated market, the same level of growth without losing our reputation, without doing stuff out of the ordinary to make up for the sales that, are harder to get now because of the whole condition of the market and the saturation, right? And so if there's one thing I've seen, and, if you've been in the space long enough, there's so many different ways and methods and models to scale to 8 figures and beyond, right? There's people that just do it only through VSLs, which we'll talk about. There's people that do it through low ticket ascension funnels, paid DM funnels, you name it, right? Like, there's so many different ways to do it, and there's no right or wrong. It really just comes down to the way you want to build your business, right? And so I think the best way for me to start off this video is by sharing some of the core values that we have across the partners that we work with, and what we build around that. So what we're optimizing for, there's a few things. Mainly high margins. So for us, that usually means, depending on the company, anywhere from 60 to 70% plus on the business. And then we want to have a lean team. We don't like to have our headcount over 30 or so, depending on, again, the scale and where you're at. Longevity and reputation. We want to be here for not just 1 or 2 years. We want to be here for a very long time. And so a lot of the partners we've worked with for multiple consecutive years and continue to plan to, because we're not building to just be a one-trick pony or a 1-year type of brand and then lose everything. Because as much as this is an exciting business, one of the things that at least we prioritize is the future of how we can use this audience or use our brand to make waves in other industries, or, going into different businesses aside from this that could be a little bit more exit friendly, for example, right? But we don't want to blow that reputation at the cost of maybe an extra $1 million that year. So a lot of things that we factor into when we're making decisions behind sales funnels, scaling, and all that good stuff, right? And then bottom line for us is always, how do we hit 8 figures year over year, which is pretty challenging. And especially if it's the first time you're hitting 8 figures, there's a lot that goes into it. But hitting it once is great, but hitting it multiple times a year can get pretty interesting, and you will need to get more creative with the way you're selling and adapt to where the market is right now, right? Kind of like what we're doing today is I'm going to walk you through some of the ideas that we're going to be implementing to survive this market and make the most out of it when I'd say a lot more people are just competing for market share. And we're trying to take up more market share through different avenues and different lenses, for example, right? So that's really, what we prioritize, and that's not for everyone. Some people like to run bigger teams. Some people don't care to run on smaller margins. But at the end of the day, for us, the one thing that matters for us is how much are we making net income at the end of the day, right? Because for us, at least, we just don't want to play the game of making a lot of money top of funnel and then, not having anything when it comes to looking at the balance sheet at the end of the month or year. So, we factor a lot of that in. And again, all of that revolves around how you're deciding to build this business and what you value the most. So everyone's going to be different, but once you identify those, then you can go out and start looking at what's the best strategy for me to achieve that. Because maybe you don't need a lot of funnels or don't need a lot of fluff to hit your goals if it's a lot more simpler, or vice versa. Maybe you do need a lot more complexity for the ship that you're trying to build. So again, it all comes down to where you are, where you're trying to get to, and optimizing for that. And then understanding back to your strengths and weaknesses, what are levers that you can pull that will give you higher leverage. So going a little further into this, right? Especially for us, since we've been primarily focused on organic for the last about 8 years now, that's our, I guess you can say, specialty. And so we've had to spend very, very minimal on paid acquisition to get customers. Now, there's nothing wrong with paid. We've just haven't leveraged it as much as probably most have if they're only a paid organization, right? Now, our philosophy on organic is usually I see a lot of people in the industry and they'll run organic machines and organic ships similar to paid, right? And so they'll try to mimic what someone is doing over here, which is probably a whole different world of how they're working and how they're doing stuff. But when you try to bring that over to an organic world, there's not much parallel to that. You're probably going to end up doing a lot of damage, if anything, if you do it incorrectly. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, how we're combining paid with organic. But organic is a very sensitive machine because it has a lot more to do with your reputation, your brand, and that's the one thing that you can't really trade for in the future, right? Like you can't get time back and you can't get reputation back. You can always get money back. But once you lose your reputation, it's going to get only harder for your conversion rate to sell or sell anything long term, right? Especially if your goal isn't to just always sell education forever and you're going to want to branch into doing something else. You probably want to consider that, right? And again, that goes back to values. Like if that's something you prioritize, great. If not, that's, everyone's own way of doing business, right? So first thing is when you're organic first, you're naturally starting off marketing first, sales second, right? And what I'll show you guys in a diagram in a second, but when I see most brands starting out organically and they're launching, let's just say their high ticket product, immediately they'll try mimicking how someone's paid funnel is working, or they'll try to mimic someone that's running an organic funnel who's also taken inspiration from someone who's ran a paid funnel. And those are more sales organizations, right? Again, no right or wrong way to do this, but when you are organic first, you want to lean into your strengths of marketing. If you're organic first, what I mean by that is usually you'll have at least one platform, whether it's X, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, you name it, right? But at least one of those, I would imagine you have some sort of edge or you have some decent level of growth on those platforms, right? Relative to your industry, whatever that number is or whatever that audience size is. But I'd imagine you have some sort of familiarity here. Now, for some reason, there's people that respect you, that listen to your content, that have a loyal connection with you organically. Now, that being said, what you want to do is you want to lean into that and you want to see how can you expand your horizon on, essentially one of your strengths here and add more people to your market share, or basically reach more people through the way you've been marketing so far, right? And so rather than going straight to a sales funnel where you'll set up a VSL, you'll start getting calls booked, and then you'll eventually close them. And obviously there's so much in between here and here, and all those complexities. Like if you're trying to implement those are going to come off very non-linear to what you've kind of built and why people follow you. So compared to where they came from, organic audiences are usually much more bought into your brand. They don't require the same level of selling that someone who's cold probably will, right? Usually, if you have an organic brand, just to give you some context, if you're running paid and you're running to people that have no idea about who you are, they will probably require a lot more touch points to actually first understand who you are, what you do, how you can help them, and then maybe they'll consider buying from you based on the proof you have, right? With organic, you kind of already check those boxes off, right? So by you defaulting and putting everyone through the same machine that is more so unnecessary, you're doing yourself more damage. And damage in terms of what comes back to your brand value, right? And so the way I look at it is everyone's personal brand is pretty much a ticker symbol. So if you look at stocks, this is the equivalent of what I would categorize personal brands as, right? Each person you are your own ticker symbol, and you have value associated with your name. Now, what you choose to do with that and what marketing and sales actions you do will determine if your stock value is going to dip or going to increase. And that's going to determine long term if you're going to be around long enough, right? If you keep doing actions that's going to plummet your stock value, running sales, heavy CTAs, and you're marketing to people that aren't ready to be sold to, you're just going to constantly go down on this kind of downward spiral. Versus if you promote more goodwill, you sell less frequently online, you have more ways to build connections with people, you build more density with your audience. Those are all ways to build up your stock value, right? Now, this ties into the next point, which is organic. The advantage you get with organic is you get to start playing a qualitative game versus a quantitative game. Now, what that means is when you're running an operation more on the paid side, you're running it more so based on numbers. It's just a numbers and math game. And so all you need to do is, and I make that sound super simple, but realistically, you're improving the number of leads you get, the number of calls booked, how much your conversion rate is, show rate is, and all those metrics that go in through the whole funnel, right? And usually you keep tweaking each knob until you get it to the most perfect version. And obviously there's people involved, so there's human error and there's systems and operations, and there's so much more that goes into it. So I don't want to belittle or make it sound like it's super simple. It's definitely really, really hard, especially in this market, to do this. So whoever's nailed it and is doing it at a high level, they know who they are, hats off to them. But that's the game you're playing, right? You're playing a more numbers game. When you're running an organic organization, yes, you can technically do this, but you don't control organically how much throughput you're getting to the funnel. These people can, right? So the organizations that are running paid, they know exactly for how much they spend, they're going to get in return in terms of traffic, right? Whereas over here, you can post 50 times a day, 100 times a day. And I guess a great example is, like, for example, if you look at Alex Hormozi, he's essentially, pulled off some massive numbers, but he also is, I think, getting anywhere organically 800 million impressions, I think, across the year or something, right? I'll probably have to fact check that, but it's somewhere up there. I think with paid plus, it's probably 1 billion or more. But even then, you're not able to control because the platform is choosing how much they're going to feed you, right? Some content's going to do better than others. And so if your content's doing well one month, sure, your numbers statistically probably will do better that month too, right? But the game a lot of people are missing when they're doing organic is, again, they're mirroring a paid model. And again, you want to have those metrics in place. However, you get to tap into more qualitative metrics, right? And so basically, if you have, this is, across the industries, separate niches, whatever you want to compare brands for. But there's people that have 1 million followers, and then I've seen people that have like less than 100K followers on Instagram, or let's just say in total combined. But the density of these or this audience is going to be a lot higher than this one, right? And that's qualitative. It's like, how deep are you going with the people that follow you? How much of a positioning do you have with those people to extract a certain level of value or exchange from them, right? And so when you're able to do this, you're able to play a lot more levers, and you can tap into more of a marketing first approach where you can do more events. You can have more indirect products that you can send to people to purchase first, right? And again, you can do that through paid, but again, through organically, you're able to just essentially extract more for how much you're able to build in terms of density, right? The more goodwill you feed to these people, the stronger of a brand you build with them, the further you'll essentially go in terms of extracting value from them, right? So it all comes back to, again, quality as much as quantity with organic. And if you dial both of those things in, you're able to have some massive turnarounds and, chain of events that will probably add to the surplus of your bottom line in cash flow, right? Whereas in paid, organizations have to just keep on making sure this one machine works. And usually, and I'll probably mention this sooner in this presentation below, but the more pressure you put on one machine, the harder it becomes and the more fragile it becomes to run that business, right? I'll talk about that in a second. But with organic, you're able to tap into more models and different ways to monetize and again, build a deeper density with your audience to keep them buying from you over and over and over again, right? And so we notice this all the time with people that have less views, less subscribers or followers, but because they have high density, they're able to extract so much more from their audience compared to someone that has 1 million followers, but they have no density at all. And they're trying to mimic a game similar to this, but that's only hurting them from a brand value point of view, right? So that's essentially the biggest thing, and understanding the differences between paid and organic will only help you when it comes to combining both worlds, right? And the best thing I can say, and this is probably going to be the next point here, is where do you start, right? And when you're starting out with scaling, you want to scale outwards, not inwards. And this is, again, one of the most common things I see people doing wrong is I will show you guys this example similar to a vortex. This is a version of a vortex, but basically when most people are trying to scale organic or paid, especially organically, what I'm noticing is most brands will start outside the vortex, right? They'll start here. And this is where essentially the coldest people, top of funnel, you can categorize. Then the closer you get to the middle, the warmer you get to the people that are the most likely to buy from you. And so what most people are doing is they're going inwards, right? First. And it's not bad to go inwards. Eventually that's what you would want to do. However, it's a lot easier to scale outwards, right? And what I mean by that is, especially organically, if you can master this, when it comes time to go into paid, you already have the system, the model, and everything dialed in. All you really need to do is put more funds behind it or paid media behind it. And there's more intricacies with that whole thing in itself. But when you're starting in from the center, and who would be at the center? Ideally, if you ever sold a product before in your business and people have paid you some sort of cash, they would be the closest thing to the center, right? And so let's just say, I'll take an example that you've had a product for $100, right? And let's just say you've sold maybe 1,000 people to this product over the last, 12 months, right? They've bought it randomly. It's been an evergreen product, and you have these 1,000 people sitting inside of your ecosystem, right? That's your pipeline. You only have 1,000, not leads, but customers. They're in the center, the closest thing that you have to the center of your ecosystem. And so the goal is, rather than launching, and let's just say you're launching a new offer or product, and this is the same thing, is everyone mostly what I see people doing wrong in this space is they'll start by marketing outwards or inwards and targeting people here at different stages. And by the time they probably finish the launch, they'll probably have maybe done really well, right? And really well is relative, but let's just say they've made maybe $1 million or $2 million from this. But what you ended up doing is you also kind of deconstructed your ability to keep growing, because now you have no more pipeline or no more storage in your well. You have no demand for your product. There's no supply. It's very hard to maintain that level of growth, right? And also when you do it at the grand stage publicly, it's hard to take things back, right? So if you made certain promises externally, that'll affect your way to monetize later, right? And so that's the thing with big launches is as fast as they go up, they come down just as fast if they're not done properly, or they don't have proper guardrails in place. And so the way that we found it most effective, and I'll give an example, is, and maybe I'll make a whole separate video on this, but there was an offer we launched. It was close to the 10K price point, and we only had 2 reps for that. And this person, although they were pretty heavily big on socials, we did not need to, and we still aren't marketing or selling our high ticket offer to anyone on the public side, right? We're protecting it only for the people that have made it to the closest thing to our most highest quality or sales qualified leads. And so anyone that's made it inwards to our ecosystem and made it to us, those are people that we will sell this product to. But anyone on the outside will not know that this exists because they're not ready for it, right? If you start marketing to people to products that they're not ready for, that's going to make your conversion rate go lower, and that's where your decline starts, right? And that's the problem with doing big launches publicly, is you're hitting everyone, but not everyone has the same need as the other person. And when you start internally, you're able to beta test and grow outside and slowly go outwards and control your systems, your fulfillment, your product, your reputation. Again, one of our core values. But we were able to do this in less than 30 days. We had 2 reps who were able to squeeze out almost $1 million within the first 30 days of the pipeline internally that we had, right? So these were existing customers that have bought products from us over the years, and we marketed to them first, right? Those are our most loyal customers. Those who are the ones who deserve to be sold to first. So the same thing applies here, is when you're selling or you're launching, going back to that point, is you want to start small as possible. Control your ecosystem, control what you're building, and then you're able to also build demand while you do so, right? Another way to do it is while you're selling internally, you can drop, sneak peeks or behind the scenes of this product that exists. And not everyone needs to hear about it, but anyone that raises their hand showing interest could potentially move into a closer stage to the vortex or the center of the vortex, right? And the further they make it through, and there's only, again, 2 ways they can make it through here. They can either make it through by spending more time with you, and that's through consumption. So let's just say YouTube is probably going to be the best example for this, because that's where someone can spend the most time with you, spend upwards of hours or days with you, right? And the other one is spend, right? How much have they spent with you? If they're able to buy multiple products leading up to the center of the vortex, that's going to get them more and more qualified to purchase the highest ticket item you have, right? And if they don't spend, they can spend a lot more time in the ecosystem, and through their actions, whether it's them clicking through emails, watching more content, attending free webinars, workshops, whatever it is, you can track all these actions to quantify where someone sits inside of here, right? But this goes back to just being more accurate with your pipeline. When you're just shooting around different offers to different people, and their highest ticket offers to your lowest quality audience or your lowest quality lead flow, you start to diminish your reputation and your positioning to people that were probably interested in buying from you. But because your sales methodology or your buying experience was kind of unpleasant, you've kind of turned away more than you've acquired, right? And so kind of into the next thing of like how you want to do this is you want to start with multiple products. Now, I'll also preface this doesn't mean you start off with creating like 5, 10 different products right off the bat. You obviously want to start with one product, right? Determine if that's a low ticket, mid ticket, high ticket, whatever it is. Everyone's got to start somewhere, right? Depending on what your niche is, what your brand is, there's different arguments for what product to start with. But let's just say for argument's sake, you're starting a high ticket product. What you would want to do first is figure out the small subset of people that you can test this product with, build a proof of concept around it, and then slowly bring it outside of your vortex, right? Now, if let's just say you start with a low ticket item, you go from your high ticket and then your next step is to create a low ticket item, you maybe want to solve for maybe 1 out of the 10 problems that you solved for in this high ticket product, right? And that will be the first step into your ecosystem, right? And if there's a mid-ticket item, usually what that does is it creates a bridging between your low ticket and high ticket. And then there's multiple products in between here or here. I've seen upwards of 20 low ticket items or products created for certain brands to target certain pain points and certain problems. But the main important thing, if I could say one thing about this topic about products, is that you don't want to create an offer or product that makes it harder to sell the next thing. That's one thing about creating too many too fast, is you might rupture, one of the high ticket conversions because you may have an offering that's too similar for the low ticket, for example, or mid ticket. So you want to be very careful that it complements the next product, kind of like a staging thing, where it makes sense for them to upgrade to the next stage, right? So what's this low ticket product? It's stage 1. Then you have 2, and then 3, and then slowly make it up the way on the ladder, right? Now, what I'll talk about usually is the finest version of this whole thing is when you can reduce the pressure on someone's buying decision, right? And if someone's too early in the customer journey, you can then sell them a product that meets them for where they're at. But then again, back to the staging thing, when they're ready for the next stage, they can upgrade and go from the next thing to the next thing. Because if there's one thing scientifically, they've done studies on this too, people purchase when they're happy, when they have the highest dopamine spike, right? They're not going to purchase when they're in a state of fear. And so if it makes it hard for your kind of offer to be sold to them, or it feels a lot of pressure when someone has to make a decision on buying your offer, usually you're playing a very aggressive and fragile game because you probably only have one shot to sell that person. And if you don't do a great job, they're either going to go buy from someone else or you're never going to get them to buy from you ever again. And again, that goes back to reputation and the power of building qualitative measures, right? If someone's not ready for that certain product, you want to see, does your market share have enough, or do you have a big audience size and demand pool to serve them a lower ticket item or product or offer, right? And if you can make the process more enjoyable from going from the first offer to the next, they will stick around with you longer and you'll start increasing your LTV per customer, right? And so back, one of the conversations we had earlier, which was how do you grow in a market when it's super saturated? You want to figure out how can you make more per individual in your ecosystem. Because if you play the game of acquiring more and more customers, you're going to have to figure out more and more ways to either increase your traffic or increase your spend or both to do so. But if you can build a proper ecosystem where you can charge and have the LTV of your average customer go 2-3x, now you're working a lot more smarter and you're putting a lot less pressure on the business, on the funnel, and the acquisition model, and most importantly, your brand, right? Like everything goes back to those core values that we talked about. And the best way to describe it is you want to wrap up your leads or customers in like action, right? If they're taking action throughout the funnel, through the journey, through the ecosystem, they're going to have a lot more fun purchasing products or a lot more of an easier time purchasing from you, which in hindsight is going to decrease how long it takes for someone to purchase a product from you. One of the things right now in this industry is that there's very long sales cycles, and there was a time when they were like, as quick as 30 days, month to month, and that was a lot easier and more predictable. Now their sales cycles extending beyond 90 days, right? And so, especially if you don't have a tracking system or a process to understand where you stand in this vortex, it's only going to be harder for you to capture that revenue within 90 days. Because if it takes one person to go from here to the center in 90 days, you need to know exactly what checkpoints that they're going through and tracking all of those checkpoints until they make it there. And then figuring out how you can improve those checkpoints and so on and so forth, right? This topic probably requires a video on its own, but if there's one thing that this summarizes to, it's that you need to have multiple products and multiple ways to grow and scale, especially if you're trying to cross a trajectory of 8 figures, right? You can maybe scale to multiple 7 figures with just one product, right? But back to our core values, we're trying to hit the 8-figure level. That's going to be only done through multiple products and multiple conversion systems, right? But yeah, everything ties back to you're building a more holistic ecosystem here rather than one funnel. And I'll talk about why one funnel could be very fragile, especially in this and this goes for any business really, not even just for funnels. It's that when you are dependent on only one acquisition model and one product, as soon as you're exposed to any sort of volatility, you're going to start declining, right? And for example, let's just say you have one product and you're heavy paid, but that month your ad account gets shut down, or for some reason your ad costs spike that month, right? Immediately that's going to create this shift in your margin, right? You're going to decline that month just naturally. And the best way I can explain this is this used to work a lot more, I guess, effortlessly because there was less competition doing it. But to do this, you'll need to have a sales team that's always a 10 out of 10. That's a hard thing to manage, right? So and it's not impossible, but there's always going to be human error, right? And usually with a model like this, you're leaving no room for error. If you have any error, it's going to show in the P&L or in the numbers, some way, shape, or form. And so the more pressure you add here into, especially let's just say a VSL book a call funnel, the more, especially and if you're an organic brand, your stock value is going to keep dropping, right? So the more you have to promote this funnel, the more you have to keep sending people here, eventually they're going to get tired of you sending them to the same place over and over and over again, which goes back to the idea of you want to build an ecosystem that fits different people for different layers of the journey that they're sitting in, right? And that's the only way you're going to be able to build more density in your brand. And so anyone that you speak to in this space that's running models like this, the ones that were solely dependent on VSL book a call funnels, it's a lot harder for them to keep that machine running after a certain point because it's just diminishing returns, right? So you need to add some level of another product or another layer to complement the main product that you have or whatever the high ticket or main offering you have is, right? Then lastly, kind of like bringing this together is like, let's just say you're an organic brand and you're going into paid. The one thing is, if you're starting off organic first, the beauty of that is you've already mastered or built up a lot of the ecosystems. And again, that's why when you start from internally, you walk out with a lot of those things already done, right? Versus when you go outwards inside, you have to scramble to put things together and you don't have the cleanest ship. There's a lot of leakage. There's a lot of, untrackable stuff, not knowing where your lead's sitting, not knowing what the value of your pipeline is. It's a very messy structure. And so building around that and adding more fire behind it only makes it messier, right? So again, one of our thing is we like to run a lean team and a very tight ship. And so we like to know our numbers. We like to know where every lead that has ever found us exists within the ecosystem. right? Now, when you do that properly organically, and again, you start small and then you slowly get outside of your vortex, the further out you get, the more closer to paid you're getting, right? Now, if you can master it organically and have everything put in place, adding paid to that mixture is going to be a lot easier for you to scale when it comes to increasing your spend. Ideally, what you want to do is find that balance. And again, it comes back to margin, right? Understanding how much ROAS you want to keep before it starts to make, dipping below the ideal margins you want to keep, right? And if your margins are 60% and you don't want to go below that, you want to see how much paid traffic do you actually even need to keep yourself afloat or to hit that metric, right? But main thing is with paid, you're dealing with a whole subset of a different person that has never found or that probably has no clue about who you are, right? And I'm not talking about retargeting ads or anything. I'm talking about just cold people that have never found you. And then you have organic people that have already that brand trust. They're bought in with your messaging, your mission, vision, your content, whatever it is that makes someone like you. So even with these people, it requires a separate layer of marketing on top to get them more familiar with who you are, what your brand values are. But because you have all the other checkpoints already in place for them, it'll make it a lot more easier for this person to eventually cross into that central place of the vortex. Now, at the end of those 90 days or whatever that time is for you, you'll be able to pinpoint and be able to track. And most likely, if someone finds you organically, they'll be able to make it through a lot faster in the conversion cycle versus someone that comes in later might take a lot longer. But that's also just because they have less trust with who you are and will require them a little bit more time, right? So when you're tacking on paid, essentially you're just adding more layers to your vortex. And you have to keep figuring out how do you get them closer to organic. And let's just say your organic level starts here. Maybe that's when they've purchased the first low ticket product, right? And then they can slowly climb within there through taking more actions, buying more product, or just spending more time with you. But for us, at the very least, that's been the highest success rate we've seen it with it so far. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a model that we're leaning into the heaviest to, again, stick to the values over here with maintaining high margins, having a lean team. But if there's everything summed up in one, we're more of a marketing driven organization first. Do we have a sales component? Absolutely, right? But which one are we prioritizing more? It's probably going to be marketing. And so I'll leave it at that for now. But if there's any questions or if you guys have any other thoughts about certain parts of this video that you'd like me to go deeper on, leave it in the comments below. And I'll pick it up probably in the next video and we'll go from there. So thank you.